They told you that the spiritual path would bring peace, didn't they? But what if I told you that your spiritual journey might actually be making things worse? What if your search for light is the very thing keeping you in the dark? Stay till the end, because once you hear this, you'll never see spirituality the same way again. Chapter 1, it always starts with good intentions. You want peace. You want clarity. You want to feel something real, beyond the noise, beyond the pain. Maybe it's after a heartbreak, a loss, or that quiet sense of emptiness you can't explain. You start reading spiritual books, watching videos, meditating, journaling. You tell yourself, this is it. I'm finally waking up. And for a while, it works. You feel lighter. Your thoughts slow down. You start noticing signs, numbers, dreams, coincidences. You tell your friends, the universe is talking to me. But then something strange happens. The peace doesn't last. You start feeling anxious again, restless, even guilty. You wonder, why am I not calm anymore? Am I doing something wrong? And that's where the trap begins. Jung once said, "There's no coming to consciousness without pain." But no one told you that awakening would feel like losing yourself. See, most people think spiritual growth means escaping suffering. But Jung taught the opposite, that true growth means facing it, not running toward the light, but walking into the shadow. Yet. That's the part no one talks about. The messy, confusing, lonely part of awakening. You start feeling detached from people you love. You stop relating to your friends. Conversations feel shallow. Relationships feel heavy. You start thinking, maybe they're low vibration. Maybe I've outgrown them. But slowly, without realizing it, you begin isolating yourself. You think you're rising above, but you're actually disconnecting, not just from others, but from your own humanity. You see, Jung warned about this too. He called it spiritual inflation. When a person mistakes spiritual ideas for personal evolution, you start believing that enlightenment makes you superior, that your emotions no longer belong to you, that you must always be positive. But the truth, you're not transcending pain, you're suppressing it. And what you suppress doesn't disappear. It hides inside you, waiting. Maybe you felt it, that sudden wave of anger during meditation, that unexpected sadness during prayer. That's your shadow, the forgotten part of you asking to be seen. And if you keep ignoring it, it grows. You think you're healing, but you're actually splitting. You wear calmness like armor, while your inner chaos screams beneath the surface. And one night, when everything's quiet, you'll hear it, the whisper that says, you haven't healed. You've just disguised it. But what happens when your own mind stops believing the lie? That's where the darkness truly begins. And it's only the beginning. If you're still here, subscribe, because this journey is about to get much deeper. Chapter 2, there's a strange loneliness that comes when you start waking up. Not the kind you feel in crowds, but the kind that makes you feel invisible. Even to yourself. You start to notice things you never saw before. People's masks, the shallowness of conversations, the emptiness of the world's chase for money and status. At first it feels like clarity, but then it becomes unbearable. You start seeing the world like a play, and everyone, including you, just playing roles. That's when disillusionment sets in. Jung called this stage the confrontation with the unconscious. It's when everything you believed starts to crumble. Your ego, the version of you that needed control, validation, and meaning begins to dissolve. But here's the twist. The ego doesn't die quietly. It fights. It tempts you to go back. You might notice this. You start scrolling again. You binge watch. You distract yourself with positive content. You call it self-care, but it's really avoidance. You start seeking new teachers, new techniques, new mantras, anything to silence the discomfort. You chase light to escape Shadabathum. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, you can't run from your shadow. You have to turn and face it. Yet, most people don't. They build spiritual personalities. Instead, they use words like vibration, alignment, and manifestation. Not as wisdom, but as armor. They wear positivity to hide pain. They preach detachment to avoid vulnerability. That's when your spiritual journey becomes spiritual bypass, a beautiful lie that keeps you from ever touching your truth. You say you're evolving, but deep down, you're exhausted. You meditate, but the silence feels empty. You pray, but the words don't land. And late at night, when you're honest with yourself, you realize you don't feel more awakened. You feel more lost. But that loss isn't failure. It's transformation, the death of who you were. So something real can emerge. The question is, will you let it? Before you move to the next chapter, take a breath. And if you're finding value in this journey, subscribe. Because in the next part, we're diving into the truth. Most people never face the illusion of healing. Chapter 3. Everyone loves the word healing. It sounds warm, safe, hopeful. But no one talks about how painful it really is. Healing isn't a straight path upward. It's a spiral. One that takes you deeper into your wounds before it ever leads you out. You'll have days when you feel unstoppable, like you've cracked the code of life. And then days when you can't even recognize yourself. That's how the soul expands through contradiction. Jung described this process as individuation, becoming your whole self by integrating the parts you rejected. He said that wholeness, not perfection, is the goal of life. But in our spiritual world, everyone's chasing perfection. Everyone's trying to vibrate higher, to stay positive, to transcend pain. That's not healing. That's oppression wrapped in pretty words. Real healing is when you let the storm hit. It's when you allow anger, sadness, fear, not to dominate you, but to exist. Because when you stop fighting your emotions, they stop fighting back. Let me tell you a story. A man once told Jung, "I want to be happy." Jung looked at him and said, "Then learn to bear unhappiness first." That's a truth no one wants to hear. You can't feel joy if you can't face pain. You can't love deeply if you're scared of loss. You can't awaken if you won't fall apart. That's why your spiritual journey feels worse before it gets better, because you're shedding layers of illusion. You think you're breaking down, but you're actually breaking open. And maybe right now, you're in that space where nothing makes sense, where you feel disconnected from everything. That they say, okay, that's where transformation begins. But what if the pain you're feeling isn't the end of your journey, but the beginning of your rebirth? Hold that thought, because in the final chapter, we're going to talk about what happens after the breakdown, and what it really means to wake up. Chapter 4, when everything falls apart. It's easy to think something went wrong, but Jung believed that's when you're finally on the right path, when your old self dies and the real you begins to emerge. He called it dark night of the soul. The moment when everything you thought you were, every role, every label, every belief begins to crumble. You stop pretending, you stop performing, and in that silence, you meet yourself, not your image, not your identity. You doubt it first. It's terrifying. You feel naked, exposed, but slowly, something new begins to take form. You start finding beauty in small things again. You start trusting your own intuition. You start realizing that spirituality was never about escaping the world. It was about returning to it. With awareness, you stop chasing signs and start noticing life itself. You stop asking, how do I awaken? And start wondering, how can I live? Because true awakening isn't about leaving your humanity behind. It's about bringing your soul into it. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And maybe, after everything, the loneliness, the confusion, the pain, that's what this entire journey was trying to show you. That peace doesn't come from leaving the world. It comes from finally belonging to yourself. So, if your spiritual journey feels messy, painful, or uncertain, don't run from Italiano. You're not broken. You're becoming real. And before you leave, subscribe to this channel. Because here, we don't chase the light. We walk through the dark together.